What do you do if you're on an engagement and you find a website? Are you going to toss it over to the web guy that you have, or are you trained at least a little bit in hacking Azure websites? Now, Azure pen testing is mostly about principal manipulation, getting lateral movement through different users. But here we're going to demonstrate how if you find a website being hosted on Azure, there are a couple things you can do, and we're going to show some of the things that you can do in order to get that initial access. So what is the scenario that we are working with? Let's take a look here at the lab scenario. On an engagement for our client, Mega Big Tech, we used a custom phishlet and successfully performed an Evilginx man-in-the-middle attack. Okay, we're doing all sorts of stuff here. All right. Basically, we got some credentials and we're trying to hack everything. So first things first, let's get out our handy dandy Kali Linux. And right beside it, we're going to have our PowerShell run in admin. And this is going to enable us to formulate one of the most powerful virtual attack stations in the world. All right, so first things first, let's get authenticated. If you've done a few labs for Azure pen testing, you probably know the deal. We're going to use AZ login, using the creds that the lab gives you. And because there are no problems with that, as you'll see here in a second, All right, there we go. So because there are no problems with that, we do not have an MFA issue at hand. This means that it's pretty smooth sailing. We're just going to enumerate the resources. But before we do, let's take a look at the Graph API and see what kind of stuff they're working with people-wise. Let's go ahead and get a graph token. And with that graph token, I'm just going to plug it into Graph Runner in order to get a quick and easy enumeration. As you can see, we put in the graph token and we got graph access, and we press these buttons in order to make the requests in order to enumerate the Graph API. Graph Runner is on GitHub. If you want a little demo of how to get it, search Graph Runner, GitHub, and here you are. It's a great tool, both CLI and GUI. And HTML GUI is what we're using. Anyways, we can take a look at the users, the groups, try to see if there's anything funny. Could try to fetch emails, teams, all of that. Anyways, there's nothing interesting in this user's graph access. Just a bunch of read access that we already have from other users. However, if this is the first lab you're doing, then you can go ahead and delve into that. But anyways, now that we have that, let's go ahead and take a look at the resources. All right, any second. Okay, awesome. So we find ourselves a resource type of websites. And so we got ourselves a website called megabigtech-dev. And let's go ahead and see if this website can be enumerated. And so firstly, what we want to know if we're attacking a website on Azure is this website a person, aka a service principal, aka a user that can access resources? And thus, if we hack into this website, can we impersonate that service principal in order to move laterally further? And this is valuable if you want to kind of scale the severity of what you find before you do anything. Perhaps you're limited on time and you want to kind of rate the attack paths in order to use your time wisely and invest in the attack paths that are more, fruitful. And so let's go ahead and see if this website has a managed identity. And it does. Here's the principal ID. If we can go ahead and untruncate it. Oh, sorry, I forgot the. And so untruncated, we can see that the managed identity, the principal identity of this website is this right here. And so this is valuable once we hack into it and we get a token. We're going to be needing this stuff in order to impersonate that service principal, aka authenticate as him. And so with that, let's go ahead and do some more enumeration. Although they might not be as fruitful as this one, and they may not yield anything, I just want to show you the different ways of enumerating a web application if you find it on an Azure infrastructure. And so I just made a few lists here of enumeration commands. So number one, we already did. And let's go ahead and do number two, role of the managed identity that we found. So let's see if the managed identity has any roles. Okay, so it's blank. Any API permissions that the managed identity has? Nope, we get an authorization issue. And is our managed identity able to access anything like a key vault? And again, get no. And so you can probably do this with all the different common storages, like a storage account and things like that, in order to really brute force your permissions. But we're going to end it there because it doesn't have any of those permissions. And now let's go over here to our second list of enumeration commands for a web app found on Azure. Let's list the authentication settings. So that's something that websites have here. And so let's try to see if there are any. Oh, sorry, this is not the correct command. Let's take a look at the connection strings. And the connection strings are something that you can use in order to access resources externally, such as a Cosmos database. You can sign in. Instead of signing into an account that is meant to access that database, you can use a connection string in order to access that as an authentication method. And so here, this web application has no authentication strings in order to access it. Now let's list the environment variables. And unfortunately, we do not have any environment variables either. Okay. So now, lastly, let's take a look at if there are any host names for this website that we can go ahead and access on our browser. And as you can see, we have two host names. We have this one, which is the original one that includes the default portion .azurewebsites.net. And then we have the second one, which also includes a default portion for the admin panel or the management panel of that website. And so let's go to both. So I am opening up Chromium that I opened up through my Burp Suite. And let's go to the website, the normal one. As you can see, we get a website. And now let's go to the admin panel. And as you can see, you are not authorized. So let's go ahead and try to sign in with our compromised user. Maybe there's some credential reuse. And here we are. I have it right here. Input the password. Stay signed in. And unfortunately, the user that has access to this website does not have access to the managed portal of it. And so what we can do is let's go back to the website that we found. And now, as you probably know from any standard web hacking protocol, we gotta look for some things. We gotta look for some hidden files, hidden directories, and take a look at Burp as we make requests, see what's going on. I put the website over here, put Burp over here. And let's press some buttons. Now, of course, you can just use use a scanner, use a crawler, and do a bunch of automation methods to do this. But in our case, it's a very simple website. So it has this Mega Big Tech AI status page. And as you can see here, this status parameter is equal to latest. And so once we find ourselves a parameter, we can undergo the protocol of parameter integration and exploitation, aka fuzzing for values, fuzzing for looking at different exploits. And one of those we can look at is a traversal. So let's go ahead and see if we can traverse through this parameter. Here, I'm going to send this request over to repeater. And let's see if we can access this page over here that we're using. So if I go ahead and request that like that, as you can see, we get file not found. Now, through a CTF approach, you'll probably end up experimenting for hours and hours. But long story short, if we take a look at this traversal, going back one directory and trying to access the same page, we can see that we get this code for the page. And the code file is disclosed here. The code file, which is on these Windows web servers, the Windows applications are made like this. There's a web page, ASPX, and that web page has an associated .cs file. So, and that .cs file works with this page in order to create the entire functionality of that page. And so here it doesn't yield anything of value. However, it is good to know that we do have traversal. And now you can fuzz from here, but instead of fuzzing from here, let's go ahead and fuzz the initial directory that we found in order to see what is attainable that way. And so let's send this over to intruder. Let's delete all of this. And now if you're using FUF, the fuzz is going to be over here, and you're going to want to include these headers, which are critical for the request to work. And you're also going to need the redirection on, which I think is on by default on FUF. But anyways, if you have Burp Pro, then you can use it as I'm using it here, using this word list, which I'll show you. So if you go to a simple word list like this word list only has under 2,000 lines. Using Burp Pro, it's going to be very fast. However, since I'm not on Burp Pro, I'm just going to be adding a few payloads manually in order to save time. And so let's go ahead and start this. All right, so let's check out the results. And if you run the payloads from the word list, then how that would work is you'll just look for any significant outliers or any significant thing that's different from the rest of them. And so if you use status code as a filter, you'll see that admin got 301 whilst the rest got 404. So let's check out what happened with admin over here. So instead of the resource you're looking for has been removed, we get this other error called with the big object removed, and this document may be found here. Now, this directs us to the home page or something, so we don't want to go there. But since we found this working directory, let's go ahead and fuzz for resources within it. We've got the admin directory, and since we know that it is a Windows web server, a Windows web application, then we're going to use the SPX, I believe. Okay, and then filtering for the status codes, we find a login. And if you go ahead and look at this login, it is a complete login. Awesome. So if you remember previously, we found a traversal, and this led us to looking at the source code. And so let's go ahead and go back to our traversal with the new knowledge that we know of the resource that we found, which is a login page, in order to see the source code of it. All right. And so as you can see here, it has an associated .cs file once again. And so going over there and taking a look at it, we can then retrieve these credentials that are hard-coded into the source code. And so admin and this password is going to be used on the admin portal that we found. However, if you wanted to explore and take kind of an explorative CTF approach, I would suggest you use this password in order to spray the users that we found through the Graph API. So let's go back here. And now if you log in, that is all the web hacking that you're going to be doing today. I hope you like this video, and if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments what kind of cloud penetration testing methodologies and techniques you want to see. I am curious to know what are your interests. So let me know and message me if you want to talk about anything security related, or if you have any project. Yeah, with that being said, thank you and see you later.